Hi everybody, this is Rolf Maurer. Posting another video on the evening of November 7th, the day before Election Day in 2016. As I said before, I'm running with the Green Party for registrar voters for the city of Stamford in Connecticut. We have several other candidates running in Stamford and numerous candidates running with the Green Party throughout Connecticut. And of course, we have Jill Stein running for President of the United States and John Mubaraka. The reason I'm posting this today is I've gotten something really interesting in the mail this morning. I think it's coming out backwards.
No, it'll show the right way.
Okay. Anyway, it's a card I got in the mail listing the name of Jill Stein and Phil Balistrieri for Stamford, for Connecticut, for America. And on the back it says, vote your conscience. Everything depends on it. Really, it does. And one party rule, Stamford. So if you got this in the mail, don't be confused. Jill Stein and Phil Balistrieri have nothing to do with each other. Jill Stein, of course, is with the Green Party, very much committed to equality in society and economics, environmental stewardship, essentially a plan for a progressive agenda for the United States, which she refers to as the Green New Deal. Phil Balistrieri is running in the 148th district as a state representative. He's been a longtime Tea Party supporter. He's been involved with the Greenwich Stamford Tea Party group, and now he's running in this office once again with the Republicans. And he bills himself, he's stated in an article in The Advocate that his campaign, he wants to be referred to as Uncle Phil, and just like Donald Trump, who he admires, he wants to make Stamford great again. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Connecticut great again. So by no means does he have anything to do with Jill Stein or the Green Party. In fact, the Green Party does have somebody running in the same district, Brian Merlin, who's running against Phil Balistrieri and Dan Fox in the 148th district. Now, we don't know who sent this. In very small print, it says at the bottom, this postcard paid for with private donations not affiliated with or authorized by the candidates. So the question is, who is it that they approve of here? Yeah, of course, who is the organization behind it? Even sending something like this, I'm questioning if it's even legal. But it kind of calls into question what the concept, the general concept of the Green Party, of progressive organizations like the Green Party, what people think it means in their political consciousness. We have the Democrats and Republicans, the dominant parties in our society. The Democrats are always referred to as liberal. Republicans are referred to as conservative. The Democrats are often referred to as liberal and progressive at the same time. Like, for instance, Christopher Murphy, a senator in Connecticut, he loves to use the word progressive, even though he numbers among his close friends a fine young man, one of the people involved in the fascist coup, the Nazi takeover, literally, of Ukraine, sponsored by Hillary Clinton's State Department and her underling, Victoria Nuland. You can see photos of him if you do a search in Google Images with John McCain in Ukraine after the takeover. This isn't what I call being progressive. And he sends this email about the day in the life of a senator, talking about his various progressive activities, and this is one of them. His constituents actually get this, and he doesn't seem to have any problem using this term interchangeably with being liberal. Meanwhile, at the same time, in the last few months, a liberal or a pro-democratic website, Daily Costs, has been railing against Jill Stein's campaign every month at every opportunity whenever anything develops. And their position is that we must desperately support Hillary Clinton because we can't allow Trump to get in. Now, the Daily Costs, two of their recent postings, the most recent one was about how criticizing Jill Stein for her position that she feels that a Trump presidency would not be as bad as a Hillary Clinton presidency. I won't go into the details of the distinction, the argument that she makes. The Daily Cost likes to nitpick and make really essentially false arguments if you just stop for a second and think about it. What disturbed me about this is that a previous entry from August, I believe, was titled "To My Progressive Friends." Um, why you should support Hillary Clinton over Jill Stein, something of that nature. So by using the term progressive, the Daily Kos is labeling itself as liberal. So apparently there is in fact a distinction in the liberal or democratic eye. However, in this article attacking Jill Stein's position regarding Trump versus Clinton, one paragraph, I believe this came out late last month. You can do a search quite easily on Google. Um, there's a paragraph that describes Jill Stein as more liberal than Hillary Clinton and refers to Bernie Sanders as progressive. So apparently, in that context, it's bad to be liberal, but it's good to be progressive. So the Daily Kos's editorship doesn't seem to know what its own political identity is. So in a situation like that, how can they possibly know what being progressive is? So this is what I suggest it is. The current model is that you have on the left the liberals, the Democrats. On the right, you have the conservatives, the Republicans. And in the middle is what's considered being politically moderate. Um, however, if you look at the terms how they're used, liberal and conservative, liberals tend to be in favor of a more liberalized economic, financialized economic agenda, more corporate influence in society. The conservatives, they want to preserve the status quo. However, in their definition, it's to reduce the amount of government influence on society. Hence, the private sector fills the void. So they're actually working towards the same ends. They just go about it in a complementary fashion while arguing about superficial issues about the same agenda. A good example, for instance, is education reform. Um, the Republican, the right wing, they're opposed to Common Core. They see it as a very conformist, conformity building agenda that's very test based and doesn't really just teaches kids to teaching them to the test. Um, the Democrats are all behind Common Core. However, what tells the tale is that both parties are really supporters of, or at least are not in opposition to charter schools taking over public school systems, which is a form of really a private school, corporate run school that's subsidized through public taxes. Um, so the difference really is that one is a two-step process, the other one they just want to go for charter schools directly. Now, why I say that is that the liberal approach going with Common Core is that, as Jonathan Pelto has pointed out repeatedly, who's running with the Green Party and actually broke ranks with the Democrats in Connecticut a few years ago over this issue about Common Core. He points out extensively in his blog, Wait, What? That Common Core's goal is to actually fail students so that a given school system will collapse. And then the politicians and the corporate backers behind them says, well, we've got a crisis here. What can we do? Well, let's go to a charter school system. The Republicans don't have any patience for that. They want charter schools right away. So in this is a good example of how they actually are working towards the same goal. They just go about it differently. You might also interpret as a good cop, bad cop relationship, of course. But their proposal, periodically, they brought it up a few months ago of introducing a moderate party, meaning a political organization in between the Republicans and the Democrats that would combine facets of both of them. Now, the premise behind this on the face of it is kind of arrogant because I never heard of a political organization being formed by other political organizations that's supposed to operate in opposition to them. Political organizations are ideally should originate from the public up to the political system, become a part of it. So this in this instance, it just really demonstrates how decadent our two-party system has become because it just has two parties that are the only ones that we are supposed to recognize. Now, a few years ago, when the moderate party proposal was made by a bipartisan push, the Democrats and Republicans were in this committee were proposing such moderate candidates as Rudolph Giuliani and Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is a testament to how, in fact, having a two-party system just essentially leads to a more and more repressive right-wing agenda. They're just going at different rates. So many people consider, on the progressive perspective, that Democrats today are actually yesterday's conservatives. today's conservatives are actually not conservative, they're regressive. And you can see this, of course, how we have the GOP is personified by Donald Trump. And what he espouses is very much a reflection of how the Tea Party movement pretty much took over the GOP from within. So you could say it kind of represents a sort of regressive parody of what Bernie Sanders was attempting to do with Democrats, to try to make it more progressive from within. As Jill Stein has said, you can't really fight a revolution within a system that is by its very nature counter-revolutionary. It just doesn't work. With the Democrats, they've done this repeatedly over the years with people that are genuinely progressive, like Dennis Kucinich, and they have what they call a kill switch. They sabotage their campaign in one way or another. So to get back to my main point, here's an alternative proposal to make it easier for people to understand what being progressive, what the Green is about, as opposed to being a Democrat or Republican. Greens aren't, being progressive is not some sort of wayward version of being a Democrat or a more extreme version of being a Democrat. It's completely different. If you look at this, the continuum described before, with a moderate in the middle, I suggest one that would make it clear to see this distinction when it involves being progressive. You might have the liberals on the left, on the extreme left. On the right is the Republicans or the conservatives. But in the middle, you don't have moderates. In the middle, you have progressives. Why? Because their position is essentially radical. Now, radical doesn't mean extremes. It means the opposite. It means getting to the heart of a problem. Not just trying to put a Band-Aid on an issue, setting up a nonprofit to deal with some social ill. Find out what causes the social ill and solve it. That's what being progressive is about. We've tried over the years working with Democrats, and we're always ending up treading water because they always want to set up a committee to investigate whether there should be another committee to investigate the problem and so on. They have expressed interest in, for instance, the proposal for state public bank, but a lot of the resistance we've met is taking the form, well, it needs to be investigated. A perfect example of the state public bank, it does not need to be investigated because we already have a functioning one that's existed for a century, very successful in North Dakota, the only state that is actually thriving despite the events of 2007 and 2008. So I like to think of the liberal perspective, the Democratic perspective, is that they make a lot of sympathetic noises, but their solution is usually to add to the problem and defer it to later on. The Green Party agenda, what Jill Stein represents, is, as she says, a medical diagnosis and prescription for the country, what ails it, by getting to the heart of the problem, finding out what is creating a problem, and finding a solution. And often the solutions are very holistic. You solve a problem in one area, you find it has benefits in other areas that the two-party system refuses to see might even have a relationship to each other. Books, for instance, like The Spirit Level, which is based on two British epidemiologists, they compare how 50 different countries and the 50 states in the unions, how they compare to one another in terms of equality. And the societies, the states that are the most successful are the ones that have the most equality, and they address problems in the fundamental, in a radical way. So there are other books of this nature. I encourage you to check them out. But most of all, I encourage you not to be dissuaded by this. This is we're not sure who sent this. They're not, they don't have the courage to say who's responsible for this. I'm assuming it's to scare people into not supporting Jill Stein. Because they might think that she is somehow supporting Donald Trump or the Tea Party or something like that. It could be from people supporting the Democrats. It could be the other side. I don't know. Things have just gotten so complex these days in this election. But and plus, it's released literally the day before the election. I don't know how many people in Stamford got this, but it's really absurd. So. Hope to see some of you at the polls tomorrow, and we definitely appreciate your support. I would appreciate your vote as registrar of voters, as a candidate for that, and the various other candidates in town, and of course Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka. All right, well, thanks very much. Take care.